Hello, I'm Herm Gailey, and I'm here to tell you that bad horses do exist. I know the popular wisdom says, never blame the horse. It's never the horse's fault. A horse may harm you, but they'll never mean you harm. Horses cannot be bad. That is generally true until it isn't. There are horses out there who are pathological, the same way as there are people who are pathological. Horses with a mental twist that make them unsafe and unable to become safe. And if you don't believe that, you haven't been around enough horses. Stick around, work with enough of them. You're going to find a relatively small percentage of horses that really have irredeemable flaws, either in their character or as a result of their background. Now, when we talk about bad horses, there are two main types. And the first type absolutely does fall into the don't blame the horse category. They're man-made. Bad handling, trauma has made them not just difficult, but impossible to deal with. And there's a whole continuum there. On one side of the continuum, we have horses that have been damaged and can be salvaged. And we see that all the time. That's one reason why the horse training business largely deals with so-called problem horses, who are horses really that are having problems with the way they've been handled and need to be rehabilitated. There are a certain percentage of those horses, maybe because they were more sensitive, maybe because of the extreme way they were handled, who have gone over the edge. And there are some of them that are not coming back. And you need to be able to recognize when you have a horse that has been damaged, and it's a sad thing, but he can't be saved from himself and what he's gone through. He's not going to be safe to be around no matter what you do. You are going to see some horses like that. Again, unfortunately, there are probably more of that than the second type. And those are the horses, and this is the controversial part, those are the horses that are born bad. They're bad to the bone, as they say. These are horses that will hurt you because they either don't care, or they want to, or they don't care about their own well-being. There are not many of them. And it's real important to differentiate between horses that are made that way by humans and the ones that are born with that psychological twist. In my lifetime, I've handled a lot of horses, and I've seen 3 horses that I believe were truly bad from birth. These were horses that I knew from a very early age that had no reason to be difficult, but who not only were difficult, but were literally impossible. 2 types. One, and these are the rarer and more concerning of the 2 types, are literally treacherous horses. They're unpredictable, calculating, violent actors who will hurt you because they can, who will hurt you because you're not paying attention, who will hurt you because you were doing something they don't like, so they're just going to eliminate you. They've sort of flipped the predator-prey equation on us, and they're scary things to be around. And thank goodness there are not many of them. I think sometimes things are best illustrated by example, so I'll tell you the story of one of those horses that I encountered. I was in my 20s. This horse ended up briefly coming to me to see if I could get him trained out of this. Because what happened was, he's a 2-year-old, he's a gelding. He had been handled enough to lead. He was reputedly kind of easygoing, but he had had no pressure put on him at all. I knew his sire, real good horse. I owned his half-brother, this horse that basically was almost psychopathic. I owned his half-brother, who was a really nice horse, went on to be a successful show horse, and as kind of horse as you'd ever want to see. I knew his father, I knew his mother, I knew the people who raised him. Nothing genetic was overtly wrong with him. He had good parents. The people who raised him were not experts, but they were competent, and they were good to their horses, and they raised them in a healthy environment. This colt got to be a 2-year-old. They had handled him enough that they could lead him and so on. And they decided to send him back to his breeder to be started. So they decided to load him in the trailer. Young 15-year-old girl was going to be the primary rider of the horse. And her dad was leading the horse into the trailer, and he'd never seen something like this, so he hesitated. And after waiting a little bit, the gal goes, shh, shh, just like that. She was standing what should have been a safe distance away. And according to her father, who was a reliable person, the horse didn't just jump forward, didn't just fly backwards. He stopped, checked out her position, backed up quickly, double-barreled her in the belly, winds up in ICU with a lacerated liver and a ruptured spleen. From there, they did what a lot of people did in those days. They called my friend Bill Wagman, who was a horse dealer. And I had known Bill since I was a little kid. And Bill's next move was to call me, and we'd try to get our heads together and see if we could do something with this horse to make him useful and saleable. So Bill bought this horse, and his take, and it was a reasonable one, was that this really wasn't something the horse meant to do, that the report by this girl's father was more emotionally driven because his little girl had just gotten hurt, and the horse seemed to have done something wicked. None of us at that point thought the horse might have a really bad nature. It was just a bad circumstance. So Bill calls me, says, can I bring him over? I said, bring him over, because I was training for people then. And this was the kind of horse I tended to get. And a lot of times it worked out real well. You felt like you were a hero because something that looked like a problem really wasn't such a big problem. So he gets there, and Bill had loaded him, and he was very careful. He used a tow line, which you don't tow him in, but he'd just run it up through the front D of the trailer so he could stand back out of the way and shush the horse on. And the horse loaded well, no problem. We thought we were home free. He unloads the horse carefully. He takes off, and I just go to lead the horse into our barnyard. Big wide gate, horse wasn't crowded. He's looking around, and he didn't like the trailer ride, and he didn't like the new surroundings, and I don't think he liked me much. I went to lead him in to the barnyard. He blows past me and does exactly what the father had described. He slams on the brakes, takes aim, and kicks at me, and he hits the gate post right next to me. And I thought, there is something going on here. I didn't put him in the barn. I just took him right up to the round pen. Thought, I'm just going to move him around and get an idea of what I've got here. The odd part was he walked through the gate of the round pen like a gentleman. Got him to the center of the pen, turned him loose, stepped back and said, go on out on the fence. He took 2 steps, turned, and took a shot at me again. There was no question what he was doing. He was targeting the human race when they put a little bit of pressure on him. Asked him to get out of the way, asked him to do something he didn't want to do. He reacted in a violent way, something that I've virtually never seen in other horses. So I called Bill, said, this thing isn't going to work. He said, well, so it goes. I'll take him to a sale. So he sort of takes care of him for a few days. He's real careful with him. The horse tried the same thing with him when he went to turn him out in a lot. But he was ready, so it worked out. Got him on the trailer again with no big problem. Goes to the sale, and as often happens, the real life of horse sales is in the parking lot. So Bill gets the horse unloaded, and this fella comes up. He's a rodeo guy. Says, "What do you got there?" Because he was a nice, athletic-looking 2-year-old. And Bill said, "This is a horse supposed to be a little bad." He didn't lie to the guy at all. He said, "But you may get along with him." Phil said, "Oh yeah, I'll get along with him." Put him on his trailer. Bill said, this fellow's name was Ronnie. He said, "Ronnie, be careful with this horse. I think this horse could hurt you. He may come out okay in the end, but this horse is not safe right now." Yeah. Because this guy was a tough guy, tougher than he should have been maybe. Got the horse home, decided to lunge him on a line. Did the same kind of move that I did. Go on, get out there on the lunge line. And there's that moment when if the horse wants to make the wrong move, you're a little vulnerable. The horse turned, pivoted. Somebody you saw it said this guy tried to step away, reacted quickly. The horse backed up, fired, hit him in the head and chest, knocked him down, blunt chest trauma, head trauma. He's in the ICU. All of this has taken place in about a 4 or 5 day period. I don't know whatever became of that horse, but I firmly believe he was one of the few horses I've met that just said, "If you push me, I will hurt you. And I will hurt you because I can't help myself." I know there's going to be a certain number of people who just don't believe this. You will believe it when you hit one of these horses. And I hope it works out for you. Now, there's a second type, and these are much more common. These are the horses that are so intolerant of the normal stresses of life that they become pathological panickers. They're scared at everything. They just overreact and almost go blind. I had a really nice, attractive Skipper W bred Palomino mare. Now, when you say Skipper W, a certain number of people will say, this isn't going to work out, because some of those horses could be kind of tough. They were nice, good-looking, sound, useful horses, but they weren't all easy. Well, this mare had flunked out of a couple of programs. Nobody had abused her, but nobody got along with her. I was just younger then than in the other story. I was about 16. And I thought I was bulletproof, thought I could get this thing going. Got her home. She would bolt blindly in a way that I have never encountered. She wouldn't run off and run a mile, but she'd take off and run 100 yards, and anything that was in her way in that 100 yards was nothing but a target. She'd just run right over it. She'd run into another horse, she'd run into a fence, she'd run into a tree. She didn't care. She didn't care if she hurt herself. She damn sure didn't hurt if she hurt you. She didn't care if she hurt you. She didn't mean to hurt anybody, but she was extremely dangerous. It was like playing Russian roulette, except 3 of the chambers have bullets in it. I was convinced that if I spent enough time with her, she'd turn around, and I was riding her, and she was having good days and having some not so good days. But she'd never had me in a place where she couldn't do her bolt. And if I rode through it, it was over. And I thought, you do that enough times, she's going to quit that. I'm riding her alongside what we think of as a woven wire fence. It has like 6x6 separations between the wires in a rectangular pattern. And something lit her up. I don't know what got her going. It was maybe me just asking her to steer. But she took off in this blind bucking fit that she would get into, because she would run and buck and just stampede, sticks a leg through that fence, does a rotational fall. And the only thing that saved me was it was such a violent fall that it threw me way out of the way. And that was the last time I ever rode that horse. You have to know your limitations, and sometimes you have to know when you've got an impossible situation. That horse was one of several I've seen who would panic so completely that they were basically suicidal. Those horses, if you want to make this about good and evil, they're not necessarily evil, but they're damn sure dangerous. If you have a horse that panics to that extent, really think about the risk you're taking, because a blind horse, blind by fear, blind by reaction, doesn't care about you, doesn't care about themselves, and can really do harm. Now, there are a couple of types of horses that are often considered bad unfairly. And it's really important to differentiate. One are the horses that have been misused and are salvageable. They haven't become bad. They haven't been made bad. They're just difficult. A second, though, are horses that have done harm but never meant to. In another video, I shared a story of a young fella who was trying to start a young horse, wasn't really prepared to do so. His saddle turned, he fell off the horse startled, bucked, hit him in the face, and within a few days he was dead. That particular horse got a bad rap. He didn't mean to hurt that boy. I don't think he even knew he hurt that boy. He wouldn't have hurt him if he'd had a chance to avoid it. He just reacted and a bad thing happened. That's not a bad horse. In fact, I ended up riding that horse for a couple of months. It was something that I knew the family well, and they needed some closure, and maybe I did too. But I rode him for a couple of months. It was a funny feeling at first because I wondered, if history could repeat itself. I'm not too proud to say that. But he was a nice horse. He was just a horse, and he reacted as a horse. And that's a don't blame the horse category. The other horses that you can't blame, even though they are dangerous, are horses that have a severe physical pain, an illness, who maybe have a chemical issue. And by that, I mean, first, you can have a horse that's in pain and just reacts. You probe a painful area and that horse strikes. It's a reflex. It's not a bad horse. It's a dangerous reaction. It's understandable, but it's not a bad horse. You can have a horse that has a disease. I had a friend who encountered a rabid horse, and he said it was the scariest thing he ever saw. I saw a horse who was basically delirious with botulism toxicity, who, if you had gone into his stall, I think he would have killed you. Not by trying to attack you, but just because of the way he was thrashing around and unconscious almost, in at least mentally awareness. Also had a good friend of mine and a really good horseman, had to give a horse a shot of penicillin. Goes in the stall, gives the horse a shot of penicillin, comes out, and procaine penicillin, in very rare occasions, can trigger extreme anxiety, hallucinations, and psychotic behavior in horses. This horse had a true psychotic episode and was bouncing around that stall in a way that my friend said he never saw before and he never wants to see again. He thought the horse was going to kill itself or destroy the big sturdy stall he was in. Fortunately, it ran its course, but you could not have gone into that stall to help that horse. It would have been like walking into a rotary mower. So that's an extremely dangerous horse in those circumstances through nobody's fault. So those are examples of horses that can be falsely accused. There's another category, and these are just plain tough horses. Not every tough horse is a bad horse. I've had some horses that were really difficult. They had strong personalities. Maybe they had a strong reactivity. Maybe they were hyper alert. Maybe they were opinionated, but they weren't bad horses. They just needed to change their ways and to adapt. I can think of a filly we bought as a yearling. Bought her at a high-end sale, and we actually previewed her, went to the ranch, looked at her. These horses were being fitted up. We looked at 3 or 4 of them. This was one. She was out of an excellent stallion, big show horse. I knew her mother, which was why I bought her. She had been a reserve champion in the NRHA Futurity, very high-level horse, a lovely horse. And this mare looked like she was going to be the same sort. She was good looking, she was athletic. But when we watched the horse be worked, of the 4 horses, this was the one that the stud manager handled personally, as opposed to the interns they had helping them fit these horses. Should have been a little clue that this horse needed that man's level of expertise in order to make a good presentation. Well, bought her, got her home, and the surprising thing was that despite having been handled a good bit, she was literally as bronchi as anything I've had that wasn't handled. She was real reactive if you moved quickly around her, so I thought, well, take a flag and just sort of, work on that. First time I moved the flag in front of her, she struck the flag itself and took it right out of my hand. And I said to my wife, this one's going to be a spicy taco. And that was her name, Taco. She kind of intrigued me. One day, our barn is set up in such a way that our hayloft allows us to throw hay down into exterior stalls and serve as run-in sheds. She's standing out there, and I'm throwing hay down. A lot of times, the first couple of times you throw flakes of hay down, a new horse will react, and after a bit, they think it's just hay from heaven. It's good. But at first, they're a little spooky about it. So I tossed a flake of hay down kind of toward her back end. Well, without ever bolting or running, she just kicked it out of the air. I thought, well, that's remarkable. She didn't even seem that scared. It was just an automatic reaction. I tossed another flake down, kicked that out of the air. I threw the whole damn bale down one flake at a time, and by the end of it, she had stopped kicking the flakes of hay. Well, I needed a little bit more hay out there, so I threw one down at her front end, and she struck it out of the air. That was how she was. But over time, she began to develop some trust. And I noticed something about her that is strikingly different, that differentiates some tough horses from horses that are truly pathological. She didn't want to hurt herself. She would not do anything that would get her into trouble. She never had a scrap of hair off out in the field. She was extremely hard to start, but I realized I could take her out of the pen, ride her down through the woods, and even green as she was, she never got me and never got herself into trouble. And that's how we kind of bonded. I just said, well, this thing doesn't need to be drilled. Let's just go out and cover some country. So we rode everywhere. And the thing that I found was the tighter the spot you got her in, the more she slowed down and took care. And she ended up being a really nice horse to trail ride. Unfortunately, she had some foot problems and kept her from really excelling as a performance horse, but she became a brood mare, and this mare had sort of a star-crossed life. She died after having her first foal. She colicked. And that baby, perfect disposition, it's just that mare was tough. She had her ways, and you had to work around them. But if you worked around them, it kind of went like this. My wife said to me, what happens if you get that mare in a bad place the way she is? What's going to happen? And I said, well, I think this mare is so careful, she's never going to get me into a bad place. And I rode her any place I wanted in some very difficult situations over a course of years. I used her to pony horses. I did a lot of things with her, and she always kept me out of trouble. I never got to find out what would happen if she got herself into a jam because she was too damn smart to get in a jam. But she was a tough horse. I respect some of those horses. In fact, I respect most of them. Can they be difficult? Can they be dangerous? Yes. Are they bad? Absolutely not. So there are bad horses. They're few and far between. Most are man-made. Some are born with a twist. If you get that second kind, be very careful because you probably won't fix it and they may hurt you. So those are my thoughts on bad horses. Have you ever had one? Let us know. Any thoughts on whether what I'm saying is true or false? Comments are welcome. Look forward to it. Till next time.